You know how people say a house has good bones? I used to think that was just a figure of speech. I used to think it meant sturdy beams, a solid foundation, maybe some nice hardwood floors that didn't creak too much. That was before I moved into the Blackwood estate. Now, when I hear someone talk about a house having bones, I feel the bile rise in my throat. I know exactly what they mean, even if they don't. My name is Daniel. For 25 years, I was an only child. Or so I thought. I grew up in a cramped apartment in Chicago with a mother who loved me, but refused to speak about my father or his side of the family. She died last spring. A sudden aneurysm. It was quick, which is the only mercy in this whole sordid mess. While cleaning out her closet, I found a birth certificate tucked inside an old shoebox full of Polaroids. It wasn't mine. It belonged to a boy named Julian. We shared a birthday. We shared a last name. We were twins. I did what anyone would do. I went looking. It didn't take long to find him. The Blackwood family wasn't hard to track down. They owned half a county in upstate New York. I reached out, expecting rejection. Instead, I got a plane ticket and an invitation. The estate was isolated, sitting on a jagged cliff overlooking a gray, churning lake. The house itself was a monstrosity of Gothic Revival architecture. Too many spires, too many dark windows, like a cluster of jagged teeth jutting out of the earth. When I arrived, the butler, a man named Graves, who looked like he had been carved out of granite, led me straight to the master bedroom. That's where I met Julian. Seeing your own face on another person is jarring. Seeing your own face on a person who looks like a withered husk is terrifying. Julian was in a wheelchair, his skin the color of parchment, his eyes sunken into dark, bruised sockets. He looked 80, not 25, but he smiled when he saw me. It was a genuine, desperate smile. He told me he was sick. A genetic condition, he said. A failure of the blood. He said he wanted to know his brother before the end. I stayed. Of course I stayed. The house was magnificent in a cold, museum-like way. But the architecture was wrong. The hallways didn't just twist. They slanted. If you put a marble on the floor in the guest room, it would roll uphill. The doors were heavy, solid oak that felt warm to the touch, almost pulsing. And the sounds at night, the house didn't settle. It groaned. It sounded like air escaping a massive pair of lungs. The first week was uneventful, aside from the creeping dread. I spent time with Julian. He asked strange questions. He wanted to know about my health. Was I athletic? Did I smoke? Did I have any surgeries? He seemed obsessed with my physical vitality. I chalked it up to envy. The poor guy was wasting away. It made sense he would be jealous of my health. Then came the Tuesday of the second week. I was exploring the library, a massive 2-story room filled with books that smelled of mildew and iron. I pulled a book from the shelf, and I felt a draft. A cold, steady breeze coming from behind the bookcase. I pushed the shelf aside. It swung open on silent, well-oiled hinges. Behind it was a staircase leading down, not to a basement, but deeper, into the bedrock. I descended. The air grew thick and humid. The smell hit me first. It wasn't mold. It was copper, the metallic tang of fresh blood. At the bottom of the stairs, I found a room that looked like a cross between a cathedral and an operating theater. In the center of the room was a machine, or maybe it was an altar. It was made of brass and glass, hooked up to the very foundations of the house. Tubes ran from the machine into the walls, disappearing into the stone. And in the center of the machine was a glass tank. Inside the tank was a heart, not a human heart. This thing was the size of a car engine. It beat with a slow, rhythmic thumping that shook the floor. I backed away, my mind rejecting what I was seeing. I turned to run, but Graves was standing at the bottom of the stairs. He held a syringe in his hand. "It is the engine, sir," Graves said, his voice flat. "The house is alive. It has always been alive, but it requires a filter, a twin." I tried to push past him, but he was unnaturally strong. He injected me in the neck. The world went blurry, then black. I woke up in a hospital bed, but not in a hospital. I was in Julian's room. I was strapped down. Julian was there, but he wasn't in his wheelchair. He was standing. He was walking. He looked better. His skin had color. His eyes were bright. "I'm sorry, Daniel," he said, and to his credit, he actually sounded sad. "I really am. But it's my turn to go outside. I've been the filter for 25 years. It drains you, you know. The house, it feeds on the vitality of the bloodline. It takes our strength to keep its heart beating, to keep the walls standing. Without a Blackwood in the circuit, the house dies. And if the house dies, we all die." He explained it to me as if he were discussing the weather. The Blackwood estate wasn't a building. It was a symbiotic organism, an architectural parasite that had bonded with our ancestors centuries ago. It provided wealth, power, and influence. In exchange, it required a life force. But a single human burns out too fast. So the family started having twins. One to live in the world, to maintain the fortune. The other to be the architectural twin, to be plugged into the house. Julian had been the plug. Now he was burned out. He needed a replacement. "You were the spare," Julian whispered, leaning over me. "Mother tried to save you. She ran away with you. But the house always calls its own back. They took me down to the basement an hour later. They didn't put me in the tank. They hooked me up to the tubes. I felt the needles slide into my veins, thick and cold. I felt the first pull. It was like someone had opened a drain in my soul. My energy, my warmth, my very life was being sucked out of me and pumped into the walls. Above me, the floorboards stopped creaking. The draft stopped. The house settled, satisfied with its new meal. That was 3 days ago. Or maybe 3 years. Time is hard to track down here. I am writing this in my mind, hoping that some psychic echo reaches you. I am part of the house now. I can feel the rats running in the walls. I can feel the rain hitting the roof. I can feel Julian walking around upstairs, enjoying my legs, my lungs, my life. I am the plumbing. I am the wiring. I am the bones. And I am so very, very tired. If you ever drive past a grand old estate in upstate New York and you feel a sudden chill or you hear a house groan in the wind, keep driving. Don't stop. The house is hungry and my battery is running low. My grandmother, Etta, was a woman you didn't question. She wasn't mean, exactly, just solid. She was like an old oak tree that had grown around a barbed wire fence, tough, immovable, and a little dangerous if you got too close. She lived her entire life in a hollow deep in the Appalachian foothills, a place where GPS signals die and the roads turn into gravel tracks that haven't been paved since the 70s. When she passed away last October, she left me the farm. My family was shocked. Etta had 3 children and 7 other grandchildren, all of whom visited her more often than I did. I was the black sheep, a freelance graphic designer living in a studio apartment in the city, smelling of coffee and exhaust fumes. I hadn't been to the farm since I was 12, but the will was specific. The house, the barn, and the 40 acres of valley land went to me on the condition that I lived there for at least 1 year before selling. Everyone told me to sell it immediately. Legal conditions be damned. They said the soil was bad, the location was terrible, and the locals were unfriendly. But I saw a way out. I was broke, burnt out, and desperate for silence. I packed my Honda Civic to the roof and drove 8 hours south into the mountains. I arrived in late September. The first thing that struck me was the silence. It wasn't the peaceful quiet of a library. It was a heavy, oppressive silence. The woods surrounding the valley were thick, choking out the sunlight, but there were no birds. No squirrels chattering. Just a dead calm that pressed against your eardrums. The farmhouse was sturdy, built from logs that looked like they had been cut 200 years ago. It smelled of wood smoke and dried herbs. But the garden was the centerpiece. Directly behind the house was a massive plot of land, maybe 2 acres, of perfectly tilled, jet-black earth. It was the darkest soil I had ever seen. It looked wet, even though it hadn't rained in weeks. It looked oily. And despite the coming frost, the plants were thriving with an unnatural vigor. There were pumpkins the size of beanbag chairs. Corn stalks that towered 10 feet high, their husks thick and green. Tomatoes that were a deep, bruised purple and the size of softballs. It was impressive, but it was also unsettling. Nothing should be growing that well this late in the year. I met the neighbors on the 3rd day. The property line bordered a dense patch of woods, and beyond it lived the Kincaids. They were a family of 3 brothers, all of them built like defensive linemen, with beards that hid their expressions and eyes that looked like flint. I was clearing some brush near the old fence when the eldest, a man named Silas, walked out of the trees. He didn't wave. He just leaned his massive arms on the fence post and watched me. "You got Edda's touch?" he asked. His voice sounded like gravel grinding together in a mixer. I stood up, wiping sweat from my forehead. "I'm trying," I said, offering a polite smile that he didn't return. "The soil here is incredible. I've never seen anything grow this fast. I planted some radishes yesterday, and they've already sprouted." Silas spat a stream of dark tobacco juice onto the ground. "Soil's hungry," he said. It wasn't a metaphor. He said it like he was talking about a dog. Edda knew how to feed it. "You better learn fast, boy. Frost is coming. The earth needs its winter coat." I didn't know what he meant, and honestly, I was too intimidated to ask. I just nodded and told him I'd do my best. He stared at me for a long moment, his eyes scanning me from head to toe, before he turned and disappeared back into the woods without another word. Things got strange a week later. I decided to expand the garden. Edda had left a shed full of tools, so I grabbed a heavy iron spade and went to work on a patch of weeds near the tree line. The ground was soft, surprisingly easy to dig. It felt yielding, almost like cutting into a cake. About 2 feet down, my shovel hit something hard. I thought it was a rock. I got down on my knees and cleared away the dirt with my gloved hands. It wasn't a rock. It was bone. I pulled it out. It was a skull. At first glance, I thought it was a deer. It had a long snout and teeth suited for grazing. But then I looked at the antlers. They were wrong. They didn't grow out and up. They grew inward. They twisted back around and pierced the eye sockets, curling into the brain cavity. I felt a shiver run down my spine. It was a mutation, a freak of nature. I tossed it aside and kept digging. I found more. I found the rib cage of something that looked like a raccoon, but the ribs were fused together into a solid plate of bone. I found a fox skull with 2 sets of jaws. I found bird skeletons that were twice the size of any hawk I had ever seen. It was a graveyard of deformities. Thousands of bones, densely packed, forming a layer beneath the topsoil. I went inside and washed my hands until they were raw. I told myself it was just a refuse pit. Farmers bury dead livestock and roadkill. It is normal. Maybe there was some chemical runoff in the water that caused the mutations. That made sense. It was gross, but it was scientific. But that night, the dreams started. I dreamed I was buried up to my neck in the garden. The soil was warm, and it was pulsing. It felt like being hugged by a giant, wet muscle. I couldn't move my arms or legs. And the plants were moving. The pumpkin vines were uncoiling like snakes, slithering toward me. They wrapped around my neck, their thorns digging into my skin. But they didn't just strangle me. They burrowed. I could feel the root tips piercing my pores, sliding under my skin, drinking my blood. I woke up screaming, sweating through my sheets. My heart was hammering against my ribs. I got out of bed and went to the window to get some air. That is when I saw them. The Kincaids were in my garden. It was 3 a.m. The moon was full, casting a pale, silver light over the valley. Silas and his 2 brothers were standing in a circle around the prize pumpkin patch, right in the center of the black earth. They were holding lanterns. I ducked down below the windowsill, peering over the edge. I was terrified they would see me, but they were focused on the ground. They were chanting something. It wasn't English. It was a low, rhythmic humming sound that seemed to vibrate the glass of my window. Then, I saw what they had brought with them. They were dragging a large burlap sack. It was moving, kicking violently. I watched, paralyzed with fear, as Silas pulled a long, curved knife from his belt. He nodded to his brothers, who grabbed the bottom of the sack and dumped the contents onto the dirt. It was a calf, a young cow, maybe a few months old. It bleated in terror, trying to scramble to its feet. Silas didn't hesitate. He stepped forward and grabbed the animal by the head. With a single practiced motion, he cut the animal's throat. I gasped, covering my mouth with my hand. The blood spilled onto the black earth. And I swear to you, the ground hissed. It wasn't the sound of liquid hitting dirt. It was the sound of water hitting a hot skillet. Steam rose up, and the blood didn't pool. It didn't make mud. The soil drank it instantly. The black earth seemed to churn, rippling outward from the carcass like water in a pond. And then the vines moved. I thought I was still dreaming. I rubbed my eyes, hoping to wake up, but it was real. The pumpkin vines, thick as my wrist, uncoiled from the ground. They moved with a sentient purpose, slithering over the dying calf. They wrapped around its legs, its torso, its neck. They pulled tight, dragging the animal down. The earth opened up. The soil parted like lips. Within seconds, the calf was gone, dragged beneath the surface. The vines smoothed the dirt over, patting it down until the garden looked perfectly undisturbed. The Kincaids stood there for a moment, watching the spot where the calf had vanished. Silas nodded, wiped his knife on his pant leg, and they turned to leave. I spent the rest of the night sitting in the hallway with a baseball bat, shaking. I didn't sleep. As soon as the sun came up, I packed my bags. I didn't care about the house. I didn't care about the will or the money. I grabbed my keys, my laptop, and my wallet. I ran out the front door and sprinted to my car. I jumped in, jammed the key into the ignition, and turned it. Nothing. I tried again. Silence. I got out and popped the hood. The battery was gone, not just dead, physically missing. The cables had been cut. I walked around to the tires. All 4 were slashed. Panic began to set in. Real cold panic. I looked up toward the road. Standing at the end of my driveway, blocking the only exit, was Silas Kincaid. He wasn't holding a lantern this time. He was holding a double-barreled shotgun. "You can't leave," he shouted. His voice echoed off the valley walls. "The contract ain't fulfilled. What do you want?" I screamed back, my voice cracking. "Take the farm. I don't want it. Just let me go." Silas shook his head slowly. Not about the farm, boy. It's about the debt. Etta didn't finish her year. She got too old to hunt. The soil is starving. It needs a keeper. He raised the shotgun. Get back in the house. I didn't argue. I ran back inside and locked the door. I shoved the heavy oak dining table against it. I nailed boards over the windows. I trapped myself in. For the last 2 days, I have been tearing this house apart, looking for a weapon, a phone signal, anything. I found Etta's journals in the attic. They were hidden inside a hollowed-out Bible. They weren't gardening journals. They were a log of sacrifices. The entries went back 50 years. 1,974. The soil demands a steer. Harvest was good. 1,982. The soil is angry. The crops are withering. It demands the stray dog. 1,995. The soil spoke to me last night. It wants bone. It wants fresh marrow. I read through the years of madness. My grandmother wasn't a farmer. She was a zookeeper. She was feeding a monster that lived beneath the crust of the earth. The garden wasn't just soil. It was a single massive living organism, an ancient biological entity that extended for miles under the valley. It provided the community with unnatural bounties crops that never failed, weather that was always perfect, but it demanded flesh in return. And then I found the final entry, written 3 days before she died. October 14th. I am too old. My legs won't carry me to the woods to hunt. The neighbors are getting restless. They say if I don't feed it, the soil will take their children. It is threatening to wake up. It says if I don't give it a meal, it will swallow the house. I have no choice. I have called my grandson. He is young. He is full of life. He will come here. He will be the heritage. The book fell from my hands. She didn't leave me the farm because she loved me. She didn't want me to have a home. She brought me here to be the final course. She sacrificed me to save the valley. I am recording this on my phone. The battery is at 4%. I don't have service, but maybe if someone finds this phone later, they will know what happened. The Kincaids are outside. I can hear them on the porch, but they aren't trying to break in. They don't need to. The scary part isn't the men with guns. The scary part is what is happening inside the house. About an hour ago, I heard a cracking sound from the living room. I went to look. The floorboards are warping. Thick, thorny vines are growing up through the wood. They are coming through the vents. They are coming out of the sink drains. The soil is coming inside. The smell is overwhelming. It smells like rot and copper and old blood. The vines are wrapping around the furniture. They are blocking the stairs. I am trapped in the attic. I can hear the house groaning. The foundation is shifting. The thing underneath us is waking up. It knows I am here. The vines have reached the attic door. They are squeezing the frame. I can hear the wood splintering. Wait, I hear something else. It's a voice, but it's not coming from outside. It's coming from the floorboards. It sounds like 1,000 people whispering at once. Feed us, feed us, feed us. The door just cracked open. I can see them. The vines. They are black and glistening. They have thorns the size of fingers. They are moving toward me. I'm going to try to jump from the window. It's 3 stories down onto concrete, but it's better than being pulled down into that dirt. It's better than becoming fertilizer. If you are listening to this, if you ever inherit a piece of land in the mountains and the vegetables are too big and the soil is too black, don't sign the deed. Don't go there. My grandmother was a monster, but the ground is worse. The vines have my leg. They sting. I can feel a numbing agent entering my bloodstream. I'm feeling very sleepy. I can't move my leg. They are pulling me. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I have always been tired. That is the defining feature of my life. From the time I was a kid in elementary school, while other children were running around the playground screaming and chasing soccer balls, I was the one sitting on the bench, wrapped in a jacket, trying to catch my breath. The doctors called it refractory anemia. They said my bone marrow just didn't want to do its job. I spent my childhood in and out of hospitals, getting poked with needles, swallowing iron supplements that tasted like rusty pennies, and watching the world move at a speed I couldn't match. I always felt like a leaky battery. No matter how much I slept, no matter what I ate, I was always running on empty. I was 24 years old, living in my parents' basement in Ohio, because I didn't have the energy to hold down a full-time job when the letter arrived. It was thick, creamy paper with a wax seal. It looked like a prop from a movie. It was from a law firm in Romania. It stated that my great-grandfather, a man I had never met and never heard of, had passed away. Apparently, I was his sole living heir. I thought it was a scam. I almost threw it in the trash. But the letter went on to mention my condition. It didn't just say health issues. It was specific. It mentioned the chronic fatigue, the pale skin, the specific blood markers that had baffled American doctors for 2 decades. It said that this was a familial trait, a genetic quirk of the Vladescu bloodline, and that at the ancestral estate in the Carpathian Mountains, there was a treatment, a cure. Desperation makes you do stupid things. Desperation makes you book a one-way ticket to a country you've never visited to meet relatives you didn't know existed. I wanted to be normal. I wanted to wake up just once without feeling like I was walking underwater. The journey was brutal. By the time the taxi dropped me off at the gates of the estate, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. The place was intimidating, a sprawling stone fortress perched on the edge of a jagged cliff, surrounded by a forest that looked like it hadn't been touched by sunlight in a century. I was greeted at the massive oak doors by a woman named Elena. She introduced herself as my cousin. If I was the genetic failure, Elena was the genetic masterpiece. She was stunning. She looked to be about my age, but she carried herself with a regality that made her seem older. Her skin was flawless, glowing with health. Her eyes were sharp and alert. She didn't just walk. She glided, and she was strong. I watched her pick up my 2 heavy suitcases as if they were filled with feathers and carry them up the grand staircase without breaking a sweat. "We have been waiting for you, Sarah," she said. Her voice was melodic, soothing. "Grandfather knew you would come. The blood always calls its own back." I was shown to a room that was nicer than any apartment I'd ever seen. A 4-poster bed, velvet curtains, a fireplace that was already roaring. Elena told me to rest. She said the treatment would begin in the morning. That night, for the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. The air in the castle was cool and crisp. It felt clean. I fell into a deep sleep. The next morning, I was taken to the medical wing. I expected a dusty old room with archaic tools. Instead, I walked into a state-of-the-art facility hidden within the stone walls. Stainless steel digital monitors, bright LED lights. It was jarring. There were 3 other people there. My cousins, I assumed. A tall man named Stefan, and 2 other women, Magda and Irina. They all looked like Elena, perfect, beautiful, and radiating an intensity that made me want to look away. "The condition you suffer from," Stefan explained, "is a rejection. Your body is fighting its own potential. The Vladescu blood is potent. In the outside world, diluted by common genetics, it turns on itself. It causes the weakness you feel. But here, we can purify it. We can give you the heritage blood." He gestured to an 4 bag hanging on a stand. The liquid inside wasn't the bright red of normal oxygenated blood. It was dark. It was a deep, rich crimson, almost black, and it seemed thicker than it should be. "This is the source," Elena said, holding my hand. "It will make you whole." I let them insert the needle. I watched the dark liquid flow down the tube and enter my vein. The reaction was instantaneous. Usually, during a transfusion, I would feel cold. This felt like liquid fire. It burned up my arm, hit my chest, and exploded outward. I gasped, arching my back. It wasn't pain, exactly. It was a rush of sensation, so intense it bordered on agony. My heart hammered against my ribs, not the fluttery, weak beat I was used to, but a strong, thunderous rhythm. My vision snapped into focus. I hadn't realized how blurry the world had been until that moment. I could see the dust motes dancing in the light. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the corner. I could smell the antiseptic, the ozone, and beneath it all, the metallic scent of the blood itself. "Rest now," Elena whispered. But I didn't want to rest. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. I felt alive. I stayed at the estate for 3 weeks. Every day, I received a transfusion. Every day, I felt less like Sarah from Ohio and more like something else. The changes were subtle at first. My skin cleared up. The dark circles under my eyes vanished. I gained muscle mass without exercising. But then the behavioral changes started. I stopped sleeping. I didn't need it. I would spend the nights pacing my room, feeling a restless energy that made my skin crawl. My appetite changed. Normal food tasted like cardboard. I craved rare steak. I craved iron. And then there were the memories. I would be walking down a hallway, and suddenly I would be struck by a vivid hallucination. I saw the estate, but it was different, lit by torches, not electricity. I saw men in armor. I saw a village burning in the valley below. I felt the sensation of a heavy sword in my hand, the shock of impact as I struck someone down. I told Elena about these flashes. She smiled, that same serene, predatory smile. "The blood carries memory, Sarah. You are reconnecting with your ancestors. It is a gift." It didn't feel like a gift. It felt like an intrusion. I felt like I was losing space in my own head. The breaking point came in the 4th week. I was exploring the West Wing, a part of the castle I had been told was under renovation. My new hearing picked up a sound, a low rhythmic beeping, like a heart monitor. I followed the sound to a heavy iron door. It was locked. In the past, this would have stopped me, but I wasn't weak anymore. I looked at the lock. I grabbed the handle. I didn't just turn it. I sheared the metal mechanism right off. The strength terrified me, but I didn't stop. I pushed the door open and walked into a room that was freezing cold. It was a nursery. There were rows of cribs, dozens of them, but there were no toys, no mobiles, no pastel colors. Inside the cribs were babies, but they weren't crying. They were silent. They were pale, shriveled, and tiny. They looked exactly like I had looked as a child. Connected to each infant was a tube. The tubes ran from their small arms into a central collection tank in the middle of the room. The tank was filled with that dark, thick crimson liquid. They were being drained. I clamped a hand over my mouth to stop a scream. These weren't patients. They were a farm. Beautiful, isn't it? I spun around. Standing in the doorway was a man I hadn't met. He was sitting in a wheelchair, but he didn't look frail. He looked ancient. His skin was like stretched leather, tight over his skull. His eyes were completely black, no iris, no white, just void. This was Victor, the great-grandfather, the man who was supposed to be dead. You. I stammered, backing away until I hit a crib. "We do not breed for family, Sarah," Victor said. His voice didn't sound like it was coming from his throat. It sounded like it was coming from the walls, from the floor, from inside my own head. "We breed for containers." He rolled his wheelchair closer. "The bloodline is a singular entity," he explained. "It has existed for 1,000 years. It lives in the blood. It carries the consciousness, the power, the will of the Vladescu. But flesh is weak. Flesh rots. The vessel eventually fails." He gestured to his own withered body. "This shell is finished. It has served me for 80 years, but the organs are shutting down. I need a new home." "The babies," I whispered. "Failed experiments." He dismissed them with a wave of his hand. "We try to breed new vessels from birth, but the shock is often too great. The mind breaks. The body rejects the power. That is why you were sent away." My blood ran cold. "You were a cast-off," Victor said, "sent to America to die. But your body is remarkable. That anemia, you fought your whole life? That was your own immune system fighting the genetic destiny. You fought the monster in your DNA for 24 years, and you survived. You are strong. You are a perfect vessel. The transfusions," I realized. "You weren't curing me. I was preparing you," Victor smiled. His teeth were yellow and sharp. "I was overriding your immune system. I was filling you with my memories, my essence, making room for the tenant." He stood up. The wheelchair rolled back. He shouldn't have been able to stand, but he did. He took a step toward me. "And now, Sarah, it is time to move in." I felt a pressure in my skull that was blinding. It was like a drill boring into my temple. I fell to my knees, clutching my head. A voice that wasn't mine screamed inside my brain. "Get out! Submit!" It was Victor. He was pushing me out. He was shoving my consciousness into the dark corners of my own mind, taking control of my motor functions. I felt my hand twitch. I felt my legs stand up without me telling them to. "Yes," Victor whispered, standing right in front of me now. "Give it to me." I looked at him. I saw the hunger in those black eyes, and I felt a surge of pure, unadulterated rage. He was right about one thing. I was strong. I had spent my whole life fighting my own body just to get out of bed in the morning. I knew how to struggle. I knew how to endure pain. He had lived as a god for centuries. He had forgotten what it was like to fight for every breath. I seized that rage. I grabbed the mental intruder and I shoved back. I screamed, "No!" My body obeyed me. My hand shot out and grabbed a scalpel from the medical tray next to the cribs. Victor looked surprised. For a split second, his control slipped. I didn't hesitate. I slashed the scalpel across his chest. He didn't bleed red. He bled black sludge. It sprayed across the room, hissing as it hit the floor. He howled a sound that shattered the glass of the nursery window. "You ungrateful wretch!" He shrieked. Elena and Stefan burst into the room. They saw Victor bleeding and hissed, their faces contorting into masks of fury. They rushed me, but I was fast. The blood, his blood, my blood, whatever it was, gave me reflexes I couldn't comprehend. I grabbed the heavy oxygen tank standing by the wall and swung it like a baseball bat. It connected with Stefan's head with a sickening crunch. He flew backward into the wall and didn't get up. Elena lunged, her fingers curled into claws. I ducked, swept her legs, and threw her into the collection tank. The glass shattered, drenching her in the thick red fluid. I ran. I ran faster than I ever thought possible. I sprinted through the corridors, the stone blurring past me. I could hear Victor screaming in my head, a constant stream of commands. Stop. Turn back. Kneel. I bit my tongue until I tasted copper to focus on the pain, to ground myself. I reached the main hall. The heavy doors were barred. I didn't stop. I hit them with my shoulder at full speed. The wood splintered, the iron lock snapped, and I tumbled out into the cold night air. I didn't take the road. I ran straight for the cliff edge. Behind me, I could hear them coming. A pack of them. I looked down. It was 100-foot drop into the treetops below. I jumped. I crashed through the branches, hitting limbs that should have broken my bones. I tumbled through the canopy and hit the forest floor hard. I rolled, gasping for air. My ribs ached, but they weren't broken. My ankle throbbed, but I could stand. I ran through that forest for 6 hours. I didn't stop until I reached a highway. I hitchhiked with a trucker who looked at me like I was a ghost covered in dirt, clothes torn, eyes wild. I told him I had been hiking and got lost. I made it to an airport. I used a credit card I had stolen from Stefan's jacket to buy a ticket to the first place leaving Europe. That was 2 weeks ago. I am back in the States now. I'm not in Ohio. I can't go back to my parents. If I go back, they will find them. I'm moving from motel to motel, paying cash. I keep the curtains drawn. Physically, I am incredible. I can lift the back end of a car. I can hear a whisper from 3 rooms away. I haven't slept in days, and I don't feel tired. The anemia is gone, but so is Sarah. When I look in the mirror, my eyes are darker. My reflection seems to be smirking when I'm not. And the voice is quiet, but it's still there. Victor is in the blood. He's in my veins. He whispers to me when the room is quiet. He tells me how to fix things. He tells me I should go back. He tells me he can teach me how to be a god. I bought a gun yesterday, not for protection. I realized the truth too late. You can't run from your heritage when it flows through your heart. I am the vessel now, and I am the jail. I am going to drive out to the desert tonight. I'm going to go somewhere where no one will find me, and I'm going to end it. It's the only way to stop him. If I die, the blood dies. The line ends with me. If you are listening to this, if you ever get a letter claiming you have a rich relative you've never met, burn it. If you ever feel like you don't belong in your own family, be grateful. And if you ever see someone with eyes that are just a little too dark, who stands a little too still, run. The sun is going down. The voice is getting louder. It's time to go. And that's all for tonight. Remember, the most terrifying monsters are the ones that look just like us. The ones who might even live right next door. If these stories serve as a good reminder to trust your instincts, then show your support and like and subscribe. Hitting that bell means you'll get a warning before the next nightmare begins. Sleep well, if you can.